Alright, daily oiling point on the Blue Sky is going to be the rotary hook area. This is an area that should be oiled every 4 to 6 hours of usage on your embroidery machine. So if you're not running your machine daily, you don't need to be oiling here daily. Depends on your usage. So we'll bring you up to a closer view here. So the rotary hook is the piece that your bobbin case goes into. You don't need to take your cover off here. I'm just going to do it for viewing purposes to show you a better view of oiling point. So I'm just going to take this off for viewing purposes only. Now keep in mind, the rotary hook area is a place you want to keep clean as well, because this tends to get a lot of lint buildup and so forth. So it's always good to keep compressed air, blow this area out. You could take the throat plate off as well, clean out the top area. So I would suggest once a week to get in here and clean out your throat plate area. As you can see, you can flex the straw to where you need to blow all this out really well. And I'll even show you there's some build up into the throat plate. We can blow this all off as well. So trying to get you a great view here of the rotary hook area to oil. You can take your pen oiler and bring it right up into this black area. That's the raceway, and you'll see the oil start to come down that little track right in there. So every 4 to 6 hours you want to get a little oil in there, 2 to 3 drops. That's fine. So like 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock position up here, get an angle on your oiler here and then drop 1 or 2 drops in there. It should roll down inside this area down to 6 o'clock. And then from this point I would cycle my oil into my rotary hook, and to do that we can do that by our main screen here. Use your 100 degree button here, and once I hit this check mark here, my rotary hook is going to cycle. It'll cycle all that oil. So I'll hit the check mark, you'll see it turn, And don't be afraid to do this a couple times. I'll cycle it one more time just to cycle that oil in there. Do it a third time. Okay. Set your daily point. Another way you can do it is from the side here. Now again, I have my cover off, but even with the side here, you can still get it from the side. With the machine off, in the off position, you can grab your hand wheel for the main shaft right here. You have to push it in to engage into the gears, and then rotate it towards the front, and you'll see the rotary hook turn like so. What this will do is open up this side here now, and you can kind of see the raceway, that black raised up ridge inside there. That's where you want to put oil at. This is just another area that you can do it as well. So right here is that raised up raceway. Just a couple drops, 2-3 drops on there. Let it run down that raceway. And then again, I would come up to my control unit, push my 100 degree, hit the check mark, cycle that oil around. Do it one more time, cycle that oil around. So yeah, every 4 to 6 hours you want to get a little oil in this. I compare this like a car tire. It's continually turning, so we definitely want to make sure this stays lubricated down here. So every 4 to 6 hours, get a couple drops of oil in your raceway of your rotary hook, and that will maintain the lifespan of this rotary hook. This is a consumable item, so they can get worn out. You can have needle breaks. It can cause little burrs on the side of the rotary hook that can cause thread breaks, things like that. If you don't get these oiled properly, they can get hot or heat up, and then the basket gets too much play front to back, and you have a small opening where your needle's going into that hole. So if you got play in that, it's going like this, and your needle could be rubbing on the back side of the basket, things like that. So we want to make sure we keep this maintained well. So every 4 to 6 hours of running, try to put a little bit of oil in there. Keep your rotary hook area cleaned once a week. Come in here and clean it out. Alright, we're going to jump into once a week oiling points. I'm just going to move this over to needle 1 for viewing purpose here. So right here by your hand wheel for the main shaft, we have a sticker here that says oil here weekly. So this hole, you're going to want to squeeze in at least 2 to 3 drops a week of oil. I'm going to use my brass oil bottle here. So in the hole, I'm just going to give it a couple good squeezes. And then there is one on the back side as well. Over here. So the back side of the machine, same thing. I do one less drop back here. Don't need to over oil the back one, just a couple drops back there once a week. 2 in the back, 3 in the front. And then on needle 1, since we're on needle 1, I'll show you this position as well. So 2 to 3 drops inside this. That goes inside this silver shaft here. Bring this back a little bit for viewing. So what it's doing is oiling inside this silver tube up here. Sometimes I'll come down and put a little extra oil on the outside of this tubing, like so, just to keep that tubing lubricated. And even down below there's a little casting back here that's running up and down. And then again, after I oil these positions, I go to my control panel and go to the 100, cycle my oil so I can see that oil working itself on that shaft there. I'll do it again. Okay, so once a week, a couple drops in there. And put a little oil inside this hole as well, once a week. So with this cover on, it's blocked a little bit. You can have the machine off. Move your hand wheel here manually down. You can go through this and oil it through there as well. And then after you've oiled this, of course, go to your 100-degree. Cycle it. There we go. And if you want, cycle it a couple times, just work that oil in. Okay, so now I'm going to go over to needle 15. I'm going to manually just change from the control panel from 1 to 15. Now this side we have this is our thread pin release. So this is the solenoid that kicks out the pin holder here. So if you can see, I'll push this down, you'll see the pin move out right here where my thumb's at. So there is an oiling point behind this cover as well. I've taken the liberty of taking both set screws out down here. So there's 2 set screws here. So this cover actually has 2 set screws, one here and then one down below. And to get to this one down below, I actually had to take these out just to get to that set screw a little easier. So if you take these out, you have to be careful of this thing moving up and down. So you want to try to keep that position properly, because this back motor right here is what has the upper thread hook come down to grab the thread. So if this bar becomes out of position here, it could hang up trying to come down. So we want to make sure we have this in the correct position when we reinstall this back together. Okay, so I've already have this bottom set screw out because I've taken the top two. And there's our solenoid. Just let it hang there. Okay, so from this area, I'll show you inside the head here. Get a better view. Okay, this area, you'll see this silver shaft here. That's our reciprocator shaft, and that oiling point for that shaft is up here. So same thing as on needle 1. The silver rail up top goes under the head. First set screw, or first hole, has a set screw here. You have to go down further in. You may need a flashlight to view back in here, and there's the hole back there, and that goes to that silver shaft there. So that's an oiling point. We want to oil this every week, 2 to 3 drops in there. That goes inside this shaft. And again, like the first needle, when I did the other shaft on the other side, I tend to put a little oil on the outside shaft as well, just to lubricate it on the outside. So I'll go ahead and put some in the top, inside the shaft there, 2 to 3 drops, and then I'll put a little bit on the outside here as well. See, it goes down into that reciprocator. And I also did below the reciprocator down here. Down here as well. On that shaft. And again, after you've oiled those points, go to the control panel, hit your 100 degrees, cycle that oil. You'll see it move up and down. Two to 3 times just to cycle it. Okay, with the machine off, again, you can actually use the main shaft hand wheel, engage it into the gears, and then you can roll the main shaft downwards a little bit. You'll see this crank arm moving. And the top of that crank arm, there's actually a hole here. That little hole is an oiling point. And then if I look at the bottom of that crank arm, there's another hole down here. That is an oiling point as well. So this crank arm has an oiling point at the top and the bottom. The bottom does not have bearings in it, but it's metal to metal on a metal rod. So we want to make sure we get a little oil inside there, and this top one has needle bearings inside there. So you want to make sure you get a little oil in those points as well. This is a weekly point. I'd like to see you get this every week, but if you feel like this is too much, at least try to get in here once a month. Again, depending on your usage of your machine, you definitely want to make sure you get some oil in these points. This is a crank arm that's important as well. Front cover here. Take these set screws out. Then this will slide out the side. Try not to have it pull all your threads out. It slides right out. Now this little felt pad is a pad that absorbs your oil for your needle bars. So as a tech, I would come in here sometimes and just press my finger on it and see if I get a little oil on it. If I didn't, I would know that the customer was not oiling their machine properly. Now they do usually recommend, like in between the spring and the silver bar, to oil here. You can put 1 drop. A little bit on each one. So you want to do all 15 needles. You don't want to over oil here too much, because what will happen is when you're embroidering, if you have too much oil in here and it's puddled up down below, it's going to start to splatter down here onto your fabrics, which is what you don't want. Initially, sometimes I put a little bit of extra oil inside the pad here, but this is what you want to be careful of. You don't over oil too much, because this little, like I said, the felt pad absorbs this oil, and to me it helps lubricate this needle bar as it comes down, but you want to make sure you don't over oil here. And if you do get too much over oil and it starts splattering down here, what you have to do is come in here and try to absorb some of this oil up with maybe a Q-tip and so forth. So I wouldn't recommend saturating this pad like I just did. Mainly your needle bars, and you can do the top of the needle bars as well, which is going to be up here in between, like right up in here. You'll see the top of the needle bar and a spring. So you want to get a little bit of oil on each top as well. A little drop. And again, you want to do all 15. You can get a flashlight and help you out for viewing purpose. There we go. And then usually after doing all 15 needles here, I would recommend doing like an H test or something like that. So it does all 15 needles, testing each one, working all that oil in. And then you can see after you've done your test here if you have any oil splattering and so forth. If you do get some oil splatter, I would recommend running a couple samples out, 2 to 3 samples, till that oil starts to dissipate. Or if it's so bad that it's still splattering, you may have to come in here and clean up some of that oil. So just be careful on your oiling. You don't want to over oil in here. Like I said, 1 drop on each needle bar on the lowers, and then 1 drop on the top as well. So there's a metal casting through here, so you want to make sure you get oil up here as well, and that's once a week. Let me move this needle over, back to 1. So down here behind the throw plate on this big silver metal plate, there is a set screw here, and then right next to it is a hole. This is an oiling point as well. So once a week you want to make sure you get some oil in this one as well. 2 to 3 drops. And then of course if you get a little bit up there, you can always wipe that off before you do any samples. So this oiling point actually does a bushing down inside this rotary hook shaft. So there's a bushing in this area behind the rotary hook here. So down in this area you'll see a roundish, this is a round bearing shaped like a nickel. Basically it's round. You can put a little oil on this bearing as well. And that's for doing the color changes. So right there is the bearing. It's round and shaped like a nickel. You put a little oil on top of that bearing as well. And this little bar here, where it holds the black plastic piece, kind of like a horseshoe. This piece that sits inside that, this is the black piece. There's a bearing that sits inside here. You can put a little oil on that bearing as well. So a little bit on this side right here. There we go. And again, after oiling those points, always go back to the control unit, hit your 100, cycle that oil in place. Do it a couple times to work that oil in. And that's it for oiling points. The rest is putting it all back together. Just pretty simple, just slide your cover back in. So as I said, with the side cover, if you do take these off, you definitely want to make sure before you tighten them up. Just going to get these set screws started here. So as you can see, there is an adjustment that slides up and down. We'll make sure when you tighten these down, make sure this is in the fully up position, and then come back in here and tighten this down. There we go. That way in the up position, the head will move nice and smoothly. If this is in the down, This could hang up down here on that color change movement and then cause an error code. So one way to check your position and smooth, you can just change needles just to make sure everything's moving smoothly. There we go. Back to 1. Proper positioning is in the up. And don't forget, same thing like the left side on needle 1 with the silver cover. When we put these set screws in, we want to make sure this cover is up in its up position as we can get it. So I'm going to put the silver cover on before I put these 2 set screws in here on this little Velcro bar. This bottom one is a little trickier to get to. Okay, and like I said, before you tighten up them set screws, you can kind of see there is a adjustment there up and down. So you want to make sure this is in the up position. Horizontal, you don't want to have it crooked. And then come in and tighten those up. There we go. And then we go to our Velcro bar. Install these set screws down here. And then before I actually tighten these up, like I said, this is an adjustment up and down as well. I like to grab my motor on the back side with the little thumb wheel here and make sure it goes in that Velcro bar nice and smooth. And at that point, I will start to tighten one set screw up. And then tighten up the other one. I do them finger tight, and then I just come back in, snug them up just a little bit more. There we go. True test you can do is the scissor on the control panel. Do the scissor cut. One on the left side does upper and bobbin cut at the same time. Make sure the little slider hook comes down, no hanging up, and you should be pretty good. The rest is pretty much done there. We just got to put our throat plate back on and our cover. I mean, that was taken off for viewing purposes, so most of this you don't have to take off. You may have to take this cover off on the left side to get to these oiling points, which is kind of a downfall, but I kind of showed you in the viewing how to do it properly. Cover slides right off, real easy, back on. Oil through your oils up here, and then down here. This will help keep your machine maintained for oiling points, your weekly and daily points.